A good film can entertain, but the right film can disrupt, educate, and empower. Today's guest takes us on a journey through Latin American cinema, the classroom as a battleground, and the global power of protest. This is a story of images, of memory, and of histories that demand to be told. This is a story your city forgot. Go ahead and introduce yourself. We were talking a little bit here about your experience teaching. Just introduce yourself a
Sure,
little bit.
sure. And we both have notes, so I'll start with some of my thoughts by way of introduction. I grew up out for 1 year. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and then we moved to a suburb. So I'm an East Coast guy. I went to school in Boston. I then taught in a high school for 4 years. I then found out 40 that about 50 miles away was the University of Connecticut. I got an offer to go into the PhD program, which I took. They treated me graciously. I couldn't have asked for more. And then I was sort of teaching part-time, trying to get a job, and I got a job out on the frontier at the University of Idaho. I had only been past the Mississippi once, which was to fly out for an interview. I guess those days are done. I guess it's all done by Zoom. And so it's been a good journey. I mean, I wouldn't say I've been impressed by presidents that have come and gone at the University of Idaho, not different from across the land. But we finally have a graduate of the University of Idaho. I think he's really committed. He's competent. He's actually been there, I think, for 6 years, which is nice. I think the average is now 7 years for a president. So I'm thankful for that. And I am thankful that I can get support from my department and my college to cover the costs of being in Rio de Janeiro for 2.5 months from where I'm sitting here. So I can get into a flow of consciousness if you want, or if you have specific questions. I wrote down a number of points that I'd like to make in the interview, but I'm waiting, I'm open to specific questions.
Yeah, we're just gonna have a quick little, conversation. It's super cool that you are in Rio de Janeiro. You kind of made the scheduling of this a little fun. Uh, let's start off with you've got someone special you want to mention here. It kind of ties into you being in Rio. Uh,
Yeah,
Paulo Freire. Am I saying
yeah.
that
No,
correctly?
it's Paulo Freire. Freire. Very
Freire.
good. Yeah, Freire. And we could actually spend the rest of the interview talking about him, but I'll just bring up a couple of points
Yeah.
um, related to him. Coming from Providence, Rhode Island, and then moving to Barrington, Rhode Island, and then going to Boston, I was uh, profoundly shaped by environments. Okay, so I just think environments are hugely important in the way in which an individual is grappling with the complexity of the world. Okay, so Providence was segregated, it made an indelible impression on me. Barrington had a large Italian population, and an Italian family, in many ways, played a really important role in my journey. They were hugely helpful in my journey. And then getting to Boston, I tutored while I was in college Haitian janitors. I didn't even know where Haiti was. And I had no idea that they were basically part of the Haitian diaspora, leaving the repression of Papa Doc and Baby Doc Duvalier. So all of those sorts of things played a role in my sort of grappling as a person trying to figure out the world and as ultimately an historian. What's going on and where do I fit in and what do I want to study? So along somewhere in that time after my graduation from undergraduate, two big things happened. I went to Mexico and lived with a soccer player that I had played with in college. It was like he was from another planet. He was so good. He had married an American. They had a couple kids. I was able to stay at their house. I was running distance. I was learning Spanish. And that was really a entree into Latin America. And it happened to be also an entree into Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire being a Brazilian who comes from one of the poorest areas in the northeast of Brazil. He's passed now. And basically said education has to be both sitting down and talking, and it needs to be engaged with environments. So my little antenna went off, very naive, truly unpolished person in so many ways. And I said to myself, geez, I've been thinking about my environments, etc. So he then enters into my journey. Two of his big books are Pedagogy of the Oppressed, talking about how do you create a pedagogy for folks who are poor, marginalized,
And
don't
just
have
for,
formal.
I don't want to interrupt you, but just for
Sure.
people who may not know, what is
Yeah.
pedagogy?
Pedagogy. Okay. Teaching and learning for the oppressed, of the oppressed, by the oppressed. Good stuff. Please, because there's probably going to be a couple of other points I make. Stop me. Okay. The other one is an easier title, much later. It's at the end of his life. Letters to Christina, which I've used in courses and is unfortunately out of print, but it's a beautiful book. What did Paulo Freire say? Paulo Freire basically said, at the core of immense amount of material, at the core, he's saying, you need to sit in circles. The teacher should never be above the students. They should be equal or below the students. Should never be talking down to the students, but better listening from the students and learning from the students and talking about how we all can be grappling with our environments, how we can use our environments for education, and how environments can be a tool for true education. I'm going to put true education in parentheses because university educations, I assure you, particularly right now in these turbulent times, mean nothing to me. There's so many educated people in the streets. So that's a real important point that Paulo Freire makes that I want to echo
Right, right, yeah.
about the capacity of moving from high intellect, high intellect to street consciousness, awareness, learning, appreciation, respect. I hope that's all making sense and I'm not going too fast.
No, no, you're doing great. I only went to me personally, I only went to community college, but I read a lot. So I've got a lot of various history books on my bookshelf, and I I wasn't fortunate to be able to afford to go to a full-on university, but talking to people, it's a wonderful way to learn, just interacting with, right now what we're doing, talking about whatever we want in service of education.
I love it. It's too bad we're not live because I would turn my head and start looking at your bookshelf. I have an office incredibly, I was thinking somebody mentioned it to me the other day. It's fortunate these days to even have an office. And, I've had so many books that have been sent to me for free that I've so much appreciated because I used the book when I was teaching, so I get a desk copy. This is going to be a point that I'm going to make a little bit later about the difference between books and sort of visual material, but we'll get there. I wanted to say that after Mexico, while in Mexico, I got accepted at the University of Connecticut. So I go back up there, Stores, Connecticut. Again, environments are shaping my journey because Connecticut was very influenced by Puerto Ricans. They had come working in tobacco fields. A professor arrives while I was at Connecticut who had a profound influence on me from Puerto Rico. Francisco Scarano, he's a famous guy. He's one of the most important Caribbean historians of the late 20th and early 21st century. He was very good to me. And I want to make a real point here about, you said community college, which I have tremendous respect for. I'm basically chipping away at trying to figure out not only New England, not only the East Coast, but suddenly I'm looking at the Caribbean because I'm taking a course on the Caribbean. And then I'm realizing Brazil received close to 50% of the total number of slaves in the African diaspora, and the US received a mere 4%. So we're just the tip of the iceberg. And I'm saying to myself, this has taken me a decade to try to figure this stuff out. So I now try in my teaching to do that in one semester, give them everything I learned in 10 years by doing comparative history. I'm hoping the pace is okay.
You're
I'm
doing
hoping the
great.
pace is okay.
You're doing great.
Okay. So I get to, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time except to say to you, I had a fabulous experience at the University of Connecticut. There was money. I basically got out of it with debt free, which is a miracle. And I start looking for work, and I was working part teaching up at University of Connecticut. I taught for 4 springs at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, an elite small college in the midst of a fourth world city. New Haven, New Britain, and what New Haven, I think, are the three of the 10 poorest cities in the United States. And yet they've got these enclaves like Yale University within these enclaves. It's a real symbol, I think, of the Americas, of the United States and the Americas. Anyway, I really enjoyed teaching part time. I wanted a tenure track job. I get an offer at the University of Idaho. Dream come true in many ways. I got out here, and I have to make a joke here. I truly believe in learning from others. Okay, so I really like to chat, like we're chatting right now.
Yeah.
I'm learning from you. We're appreciating each other. So I would go to coffee in the morning, and I was surrounded by these guys and gals from none of them historians, physics, geology. I can name all these people. And I honestly felt, and it would be maybe 6 or 7 people in the morning having a coffee. And I honestly felt they would basically look at me when I try to say something and say, listen, after you've been here 20 years, you can open your mouth. Until then, you just listen to what we have to say. And I did. I listened and really learned. And I want to mention something real important about those gatherings. While I was having coffee one day is when the Oklahoma bombing took place. And everybody at that table, pretty much everybody at that table said, this really looks like an Arab attack. And I didn't say a word, but in my mind, I'm saying, I hope it's a white guy and I'm hoping it's military. I'm thinking this is what it might be. And sure enough, it was Timothy McVeigh, Retribution for Waco. You can easily go on the web and read about Timothy McVeigh, about the attack on Waco. But it just said to me, well, everybody's got their opinions. We get our biases. We think we're informed, and then something happens which completely changes the paradigm. And that was one moment of several where I felt like an historical event which played out in front of me was something that I need to dig more deeply into. Anti-Arab sentiment. Um, what was the role of Waco? Then comes along 9/11, another big turning point, etc. So I realize I'm into a tiny bit of flow of consciousness here, but these are just moments in my journey grappling with what do I want to do? How do I want to think? What kind of tools do I have at my disposal to be able to be an informed citizen and a critical thinker?
Well, and I want to point out one thing that I think is really interesting here is you're looking at the surrounding evidence around these incidents, and then you're coming to your conclusion based on the surrounding evidence and what that kind of leads to, right? So every piece of history kind of leads into another piece of history. It's just kind of the
There we
way it
are.
goes. And
There
so
we are.
it's interesting when you can go, well, I want to know what led to this specific thing here, and then you look back over the last 80 years and you find out that it's actually got a really core thing in American
Sure.
thread and fabric.
That's a great point. That's a great point. I mean, we could just go down the list, but certainly anti-immigration right now
Yeah.
is no surprise. It has such profoundly deep roots in the American psyche. I'm the beneficiary of immigration. You are the benefit. Everybody here is an immigrant. So when we have a lot of Mexican Americans at the University of Idaho, and they're under extreme pressure, and I can feel it when I look in their eyes, the pain that they're feeling of the anti-Mexican sentiment, and it's garbage. It's absolute pathetic garbage,
Yep.
fueled by a whole bunch of disinformation, lies, etc. If you look at the research, immigrants, both legal and illegal, contribute far more into the US economy than they take out. And yet you would never believe it from what you're hearing. Anyway, that's just one point among many that
Yeah.
I would, there was a great book, I think it's 1962, Robert Hofstadter, Anti-Intellectualism in American Thought. He goes into how much anti-university, anti-intellect sentiment there is amongst the whole lot of people. And that's unfortunate because I think there are many, many profoundly important intellects out there, intellectuals. I guess I'm be described as one who are really grappling with what we're doing and how are we going to protect, our poorest and our democracy and our well-being and our health, etc. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's all coming together in some way.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think the vibe of news right now is very unique. As a journalist in my day-to-day life, it's very how do we talk about these issues? How do we cover these issues? It's a real issue that we have when, some media outlets disregard what we would consider to be, the truth. Kind of an interesting thing, the media. You and I have a shared interest, which is film history. Um, I think film is fascinating. I think it's fascinating that we've been creating movies for over a century. I recently watched the movie Stagecoach, which came out in 1939, the John Wayne film. You have kind of a specialization in films I've never seen nor heard of. So you want to tell me a little bit about
Sure,
what is this? This
sure.
Cuban movie film Memories of Underdevelopment.
Memories of Underdevelopment. Yeah, I mentioned that one. I got a whole list that I wrote down here
Oh,
quite
let's get
actually.
into
Oh, you
it.
want to get into it? Okay. So, listen, I was in so many ways a traditionally trained historian, if we're going to call it that. Okay. So I sat at the foot, and I can name these people still. A couple of them are still alive in their 80s. At both Wesleyan University in Connecticut and the University of Connecticut, these people would walk into a small seminar, sit down, and just talk for an hour. So I mean, some of these were summer courses at 9 a.m. and I'd get there at 8:30 in the morning, ready to go, and I'd write down every single word, as fast as I could. This was pre-internet, pre-laptops. I still have the notes. I learned a lot. But as I go along and I came to the University of Idaho, it became clear to me within a few years that this generation, this next generation, is far more visual than I ever was. And, they tend to, I think, read less in terms of books. They might be reading, to some extent, newspapers, but they're watching an immense amount of film and documentary. They're a very visual, what's YouTube generation. Let me put it that way.
Also listening,
So
audiobooks and podcasts like what we're doing now.
podcasts. Here,
Yeah.
here we are. Here we
It's
are.
on the go.
Yeah. So I try to adapt to that. So I've done my best to integrate that into what I'm teaching with, I have to say, amazing results. I mean, when you get courses that fill up and then have a waiting list, it's a good sign. Not that I'm trying to sell something, but our survival depends upon, trying to make history relevant and attracting students into classrooms. So I get to the University of Idaho, and this master film studies historian, now 83, and his wife, Dennis and Joan West. They're both right there in Moscow, and they go over to the coast. They have a little place on the coast of Washington, Long Beach Peninsula. He says, I've been team teaching with two or three people, and we're getting huge classes. I have to throw out one other thing. There was a guy at UCLA, E. Bradford Burns, another amazing figure. And he'd walk in, he did a film history and film course, which I was aware of. And I think his lecturers were 150 kids in the classroom. And I said, whoa, there's interest out there, and I need to tap into this. So I started this course probably in the mid, I'd say from around 2005 onward. Can you believe it? So it's been 20 years that I've been doing this sort of a course.
I think that makes you a piece of history now.
I guess I am a piece of history. So um, I started, chipping away at that too, and realized I could label the course because you got to get through the bureaucracy. I could label the course history and film and then pick my themes. Okay. So I pretty much have specialized maybe in five or six themes within history and film, a few of which I've written down in preparation for today. One is, the director Spike Lee. We can talk about him for the rest of the day. Another one is Oliver Stone, who I like a lot. We could talk, we could go deeply into this. This fall, I've got 40 kids waiting for me to get back to do a course on John Sayles, Steven Soderbergh, and Steven Spielberg. So again, they can pick and choose from these brilliant directors, and they do maybe 5 film reviews and 2 film plus book critiques. So they tie the film with a reading. I also do one on popular culture in the Americas, where I'm looking at um, basically the Cold War across the Americas. Good Night and Good Luck, I think, is a brilliant film. And, that is a symbol of McCarthyism in this country, which was just huge across the Americas when you start putting the pieces together. Um, and then one other one, colonialism and imperialism. I take a look at that. So going back to Dr. Dennis West, I'm paying homage to him. I hope I'm going to have to send him this link, by the way. He says to me one day, I'm going over to Tacoma, and I'm going to be introducing Cuba's most famous director, Tomas Gutierrez Alea. And he says, do you want to come? And I say, do I want to come? Do I want to come with you? So we went there, and he had come in from Cuba, not easy to get out of Cuba. And he gives this incredible speech in Tacoma. And then I get to have dinner with him, just where the three of us are sitting there chatting. Now, his most famous film, it's we can call it almost a docudrama. So it's documentary footage of the Cuban Revolution and the Bay of Pigs invasion. For those, your audience certainly would be aware of 1959, the Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution. The Bay of Pigs follows a couple of years later, where the United States thinks they're going to invade and take over Cuba the way they had done in Guatemala in 1954, and it's a disaster.
Oh,
John Kennedy comes out looking very bad.
egg on his face.
So, Memories of Underdevelopment, I think, has been rated among the 3 most important films ever to come out of Latin America. So, it's the kind of film that, sort of a student who's wanting something light, Lite. This is not that kind of a film. You gotta really, it's at YouTube, I might add, with English subtitles, so you can watch it. And I think you need to watch it 3 or 4 times to get a handle on it, because it's footage of the revolution. It's a woman leaving Havana to come to Miami, where all the Spanish Cubans hang out and still are very, the Miami Sound Machine and all the right-wing Cubans are there, still angry at the revolution. And who stays behind? The 63% of Cuba who are Afro-Cuban, who are poor, and see the revolution as, see the possibility of something better through the revolution. So it's a brilliant work, and it's the sort of film that I tend not to show in a class if it's live. It's better that a student is able to be at home, sit down, and really watch it and maybe see it again. So I had brought that one up. He also does a number of other important films, Strawberry and Chocolate, The Bureaucrat. So he's a major hitter, and unfortunately dies at a young age from leukemia, 63. That's young for me, and he's missed. He's missed, and he never left Cuba. He never rejected the revolution. He's basically trying to work within the revolution, saying we got to become a little bit more liberal here. We've got to look at our own homophobia, our own failures, and certainly the Cuban Revolution has had its share of failures, not helped by the U.S. embargo. So anyway, that was a good one. Then I wrote down some other. I did want to mention some others if you want me to continue.
Yeah, keep going.
Is this all sounding good?
I'm invested.
You are what?
I'm invested right now.
Good. Here we go. So I just throw out a couple that, given that I do Latin America and I have to do, I want to tell you, I've taught in Spain 3 times. So I'm deeply into Spain too. Not, I guess you could call me very eclectic, but I like to believe it's just I'm trying to put together the world. The film Roma from Mexico is a brilliant, brilliant film about, and it's basically autobiographical by the director. And I just used that with another book about the 1968 revolt in Mexico City. So you really get to see the director's spin on his own life at around 1970 and an upheaval in 71, and then a very important book that goes into what happened in 1968. You might recall that's when the African American athletes raised their fist
Mm.
about Black rights. It's a huge moment, which, once again, both within Mexican historical circles and in the US, a lot of people try to push the 60s aside, try to push protest aside. And, my prayer is that this younger generation doesn't forget what protest can do. Um,
And we are out there
partic-
protesting.
Particularly right now. So, which leads to my own protests, which were Vietnam in many ways, that generation. A couple of weeks ago, the University of Idaho invited a Vietnam speaker, Vietnamese speaker who's become very famous right now. He's the author of a novel called The Sympathizer, who was I haven't read the novel, but it's gotten a lot of publicity because he's a spy and he's working both the North Vietnamese and the South Vietnamese. His name is Viet Thanh Nguyen. I'm sure I pronounced it incorrectly, but he was talking about film, particularly Apocalypse Now, how that influenced his views on the Vietnam War and him as a Vietnamese who suffered through the war. I think he's basically leaves after the war and comes to the United States as a refugee. And now HBO has done maybe an 8-part series on The Sympathizer, $150 million production. I think Narcos was only 60 million. Gives you an idea that something big is coming down the pike on Vietnam. So my question to him was, or my comment to him was, and then the question, uh, I was in my neighborhood of Barrington, Rhode Island, and Billy McQuaid, was a kid on the next street that I hung out with. He gets sucked into, there was a song for the, what do you call it? Green Beret. It was a Green Beret song in the early 60s. I loved it too. I'm thinking to myself, man, maybe I need to go to Vietnam. Um, all the machoism, all the patriotism, all the pro-war stuff, all the anti-communist stuff in a song. So off he goes, and 6 months later, he comes back in a coffin that I'm still grappling with. I was in DC and I went to the wall, saw his name. He was a good guy. He was a good young man, comes back, and I said to myself, it was the first time I went into a Catholic church because of the service. And I said to myself, I got to try to figure out what the hell's going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a young kid at that point, sophomore in high school. I need to try to figure out what is possibly going on here that he gives up his life for. So I brought that up to this author and I said, you know, I know I'm not the only one in this audience who was serious about protesting the war and trying to figure out what was going on. And I just felt like a whole lot of films and documentaries were trying to help me get there.
Yeah.
And the list goes on and on. Deer Hunter, Full Metal Jacket,
Mm.
Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, which is one of the greatest films made, I feel, Oliver Stone film, Apocalypse Now, Fog of War, a documentary, The Five Bloods by Spike Lee. And then here was my key question. There's the my gosh, if it's is it 16-hour documentary by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick on the Vietnam War. And it was the first time in my 30 years of trying to figure out what had happened in Vietnam that there was extensive interviews with Vietnamese. And it really made an impression on me. And I asked him what he thought about it, and I didn't feel the answer was really great because he said he felt it was long and etc. But again, just a complex moment in American history that I think we haven't fully worked through. Donald Trump, of course, snuck his way out of the war.
Yeah.
I did too. I mean, I got called up by a draft board and I was in college, so I was able to get out until that I graduate from college in 74, and by then things are winding down. So I was fortunate enough to come from a middle class family that I was could be protected by being in college, as were many thousands of others. Um, Oliver Stone, on the other hand, I think he quits Yale. He goes and he's profoundly impacted by what he saw in Vietnam. I mean, it truly reshapes his life an intellectual and as a filmmaker, etc. I'm trying to think of the other one. It's called Matterhorn is the name of the novel, and I'd have to think about the author. Matterhorn is the title, and he was a Yale undergrad. He was a Rhodes Scholar from Yale University, and I think he quits his Rhodes Scholarship and he goes to Vietnam, and
It's
he comes back from Vietnam completely messed up, as so many thousands of other soldiers came back on drugs, post-traumatic stress,
and
etc.
Vietnam is kind of an interesting case because it is kind of the first war that the US loses in a sense. Like it's kind of a waste of money. It spans several presidents and it doesn't really get a good resolution in any sort of sense. It is that sort of precursor to, Afghanistan and the extended universe we have there that will inevitably be a 30-part documentary, right? Like it's
Sure.
interesting how these the initial problems kind of stem from American interventionalism of trying to
Yes.
stop communism
Great,
and that kind of stuff.
great
Um,
point. If I may, I would like to really add something there,
real
if I may,
real
because I
quick.
think your point's well taken, and that is, you know, from World War II straight through to as we speak,
Yeah.
there is some major problems in the US. And one of them is that technology is going to resolve problems.
Yep.
And I think Vietnam showed clearly you can have all the technology and bombs you want. Uh, and that doesn't mean you're going to win your war. Okay. The
Yeah,
second, go
uh
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it was a general who said, if you don't fund the State Department, then you're gonna have to buy me more bullets. Often diplomacy works just as well, if not better. Dale, we have time for one final thought, and then I'm gonna have you plug a couple of your readings, and we'll call it an episode. All right?
Oh, wow. Too bad. I'm ready to go for a couple more hours. Here,
We
go ahead.
we'll go ahead and we'll schedule for more time to talk,
I would
perhaps
like that. Yes.
next week.
Okay. Go ahead. What's the one last?
Let's real quick mention the Brazilian film I'm Still Here.
I'm still here. Okay. I thought you were maybe going to want to get into street art. So when we do a part two, I'd
Yeah.
really love to talk about that. I'm Still Here is a brilliant, brilliant film. I remember it vividly in the 80s. The event was 1970. But I get to Brazil in the 1980s and they're still grappling with what happened. Um, it is about a journalist, a very well-known journalist in Brazil who gets is disappeared. They don't know, can't find out what happened, and his name was Rubens Paiva, Paiva. The film's done by the Brazil's perhaps most famous director Walter Salles, Motorcycle Diaries, etc. So I just thought it was a brilliant film in so many ways. It really portrays 1970 Rio de Janeiro. Quite actually, I hope to go to the street where the filming took place. I'm pretty sure I know where it
Hmm.
is in Copacabana. Um, his wife in real life wants the government to acknowledge that they had him in custody and that he dies within Brazilian custody. It was a military regime, 1964 to 1985. By the way, Paulo Freire had to leave Brazil during that period. So a lot of intellectuals, musicians,
Yeah.
get out with because they don't want to be repressed.
A Tale as
She
Old as
ultimately
Time.
is acknowledged, and the woman is one of Brazil's most famous actresses, Fernanda Torres. She didn't. The film won Best International Film at the Oscars. She merited far and away Best Actress, but the politics of it didn't get it. She didn't get it.
All
But
right,
I can't
sir.
say enough for your audience
Yeah.
to really see. It's a brilliant international film. The other one that I would want to conclude on is Sinners. Just came out.
Mm.
I'm gonna rate it as a top 10 film. Blew me away. It is depicting. It's a rich depiction of the Depression, of African American culture and history, of I didn't look up some of the terms, but I'm trying to think if it's called a juke house. These are places where music was made in hostile environments, tend to be out in the country.
Mm.
And a guitar plays a very important central role in the film, as does sort of Christianity. Christianity plays an important role. I don't want to give away too much of the film. It does have a very important theme of oh, what do you call it when they bite your neck? What do you call that? And uh,
Oh,
there's a
yeah. Um,
sorry. Anyway,
ah, I wish I knew it. I feel
yeah.
like it's the
Anyway,
like eating a
that's a
man type thing.
yes. So it's got an important theme in that regard. Um, and it really, I think, in a very hostile in environment. I said to someone the other day, let's hope nobody gets hurt because of this film, like a director or some of the actors. Um, but you really realize how rich African American culture is, how much resistance has played such a key role in African American culture and music. Music is a symbol of resistance. So yeah, I can't say enough about the film. I just think it was really something important.
And this
So
kind of circles back to the conversation we've been having this whole time, which is the way we use media tell history and to interpret history because, we've been making movies and music for, over a century now, right? Music for even longer, but movies for over a century. And so I think it's really fascinating to watch them develop over time. I mentioned earlier that I recently watched Stagecoach. And so you watch Stagecoach and you're like, oh, this is where all of those movie tropes come from, right? You've
Yeah,
got
sure,
uh kind of this idea of the Wild West being portrayed onto film, and it sets the stage for what will inevitably become the way everybody kind of thinks of the Wild West as like
sure,
um this everybody's a gunslinger or an outlaw and I mean I love those stories, right? Like I think they're so much fun. I've talked with historian Justin Vipperman over at the College of Southern Idaho about his favorite Wild West outlaw, Diamond Phil Jack. But I mean, it's interesting because they really do kind of come around to that. But there are some directors I think we're going to have separate conversations for later if you're up for that.
sure, sure. The two words that I was looking for is a juke joint, Juke, and vampire is the other word that I was
Oh,
looking for. Yes. No, but I concur. Films have created, you're giving the example of the Wild West, um, they created a whole perception of the Wild West. I remember a television series called Route 66, black and white. They're in a Corvette driving west. I mean, it was like, wow, there's a big open space out there in the American West. And then you start dealing with the realities of like water and environments and clear cutting and abuse.
wildfires.
Yeah, yeah.
Wildfires.
I got a great point I want to make along those lines. Um, One of the most important textbooks in U.S. history is entitled Out of Many. I think it's still in publication, but it went through numerous versions. And one of those versions mentioned that the majority of women who came west past the Mississippi up through 1850 were prostitutes. Well, the Texas Board, and I happen to know the female author who wrote that, and the Texas Board of Education rejected that, said they would not sell the textbook. So the company had to take the textbook back, revise the wording, and then republish the textbook because the Texas market was so very big. So it just goes to show you some of the ways in which I think history has been manipulated. And I'm facing that right now, by the way, in the state of Idaho
Yeah.
over got to make things public. They want to be able to review what you're doing, your readings, your words, everything. It's a very turbulent, scary time.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think, and I want to make one more good point. I would really like
Yeah,
having to
yeah.
do with what you've brought up in terms of the American West. Well, along comes, some indigenous Native American authors, and I'll think of his name, but the name of the book, the novel, and the film is Smoke Signals. So, Smoke Signals was the first film directed by a Native American about Native American culture. There's a great line in it. It's a good day to be indigenous, and it's basically a road story, much like the Motorcycle Diaries or comparisons, and it's a beautiful film. I mean, you get to see some of the issues about being on the reservation and being off the reservation. It happens to be filmed about 30 miles north of where I live. And again, it's sort of a modern version of grappling with some of the issues of what the West was about from an indigenous perspective, which is obviously something markedly different from Hollywood portrayals of, Indians attacking the caravans, the wagons heading west.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are some very interesting
I love
moments.
movies so much. I think we could spend days talking about Steven Soderbergh and his work with like Ocean's 11 and 12 and
Yes,
13 and
the
Logan Lucky.
laundromat. The
And
laundromat.
just all of those movies. So we're gonna have to schedule a day to talk about some of these
I
individual
hope we can do it
directors.
again.
Yeah.
You wanted me to put a plug into for a couple of books. Was that it?
Yeah, Dale, I'd like you to, for the audience members who have liked what you've been talking about today, and they want more, in the interim in which we haven't posted an episode with you, where can they find some of your work, and what are you working on now?
Okay. Well, they can go to my website. My name is Dale Graden, so it's right there at Google. And I offer a whole lot of material at my personal website, but unfortunately, it seems that's coming down as part, supposedly technological change. But I also think it has to do with the university not wanting any responsibility for links to personal websites. So at my official University of Idaho website, you can see my CV, you can see what I've published, and you can see my email. So I do get, emails now and then, more recently now, and I'm very happy to send syllabi and schedules for courses. So, I really feel a real responsibility to make what I do available to anybody who's interested. A book that I like, a book that I really like, that I mentioned by Paulo Freire is Letters to Christina. It's a reflection on his life, and it's a reflection on what he learned as an educator and what he's trying to do as an educator. I think educators have the ones I respect the most are public intellectuals. They're activists. This morning was very bad news for me. Two of the most important ones are professors at Yale University, and they're leaving. Three of them. All three of them are going to Canada because they said they're concerned about fascism emerging within this country.
Yeah.
And, that's not so easy for a lot of people just to pick up and leave. So that's very disturbing to me. Um, I'm trying to think, let's see here. I was trying to think about a book that I would highly recommend about. It's entitled, I think, The Killing Fields, maybe in Latin America. I'd have to look it up. So the best thing is for somebody to get in touch with me. I don't want to, he's a UConn graduate, and I wasn't prepared for exactly recommendations. But if you get in touch with me, I'm happy to send you extensive syllabi. Another guy who just retired, another professor. Well, so I've got two people that I highly recommend because tied to my research, okay? And they're both, one's just retired and one's still in working hard. Marcus Rediker at the University of Pittsburgh, an immense publication record. And he wrote a beautiful book on a dwarf. He's considered the first American abolitionist, and he's a dwarf, and it's a great read. And the other one is George Reed Andrews, who just retired at the University of Pittsburgh, prolific, talking about Afro-Latin America, talking about race relations in Latin America. He helped me out a lot in my journey. Have great respect for him. So there would be three intellectuals, and I realize they're males. Some of the most important work being done are female historians um, on, for example, U.S. intervention in Haiti. I'll send you the list. I'll send you the citations. My pleasure. So those would be
Yeah.
some that immediately come to mind. So
Yeah, Dale, thank you so much for your time. I know that you're a very busy guy, and I really, really appreciate it. I hope that
you
we can.
wanted to know what I'm doing. I'm going to sign off by telling you my project is entitled African Voices in the Transatlantic Slave Trade. That's why I'm in Rio. Rio's an African city. It's the quintessential African city in the Americas, and it's got an immense amount of information on hidden histories, hidden African voices in the slave trade. That's what I'm up to. It's been an honor chatting with you, and I hope we
Yeah,
can do it. I hope we can do it again, Justin.
From the streets of Salvador to the classrooms of Idaho, Dale Graden's work shows us that the power of storytelling stretches across borders and generations. If today's conversation moved you, go watch a film you've never heard of and listen closely. There's history there, and it's waiting to be remembered. I want to personally thank Dale for appearing on the program to help bring us this story and conversation. This has been a story your city forgot.